So my guest today, this is part 3, and you've got to watch part 1 and part 2. Part 1, we introduced his book, A Doctor's Notes, and called Taken from Both Sides of the Bed Sheets. And Dr. Tom Godwin is a noted cardiologist and is part of the first sort of cardiology center in Canada at the Toronto General Hospital back in 1962. Broke his neck a couple of times, built his own airplane, and we're talking about some of his stories. We just did the Nishka Treaty. So when you said before in our first part that you were sort of interested in native rights and all the rest of it, that's one of my absolute favorite topics. And,
good for you, because it's 150 years ago, when we started putting natives on reservations in North America, it was a mistake then. So why are we perpetuating it? We just got to make a change. These people have to be treated like a normal person, and that's what we're not doing. They just don't have. It's so depressing to go to most of the reservations that I've been to, especially the ones up north. That the kids don't have a chance. They don't get exposed.
Well,
and that's that's terrible.
The biggest thing we did to them, and we could talk about up north because I've been to so many reservations up there as well. But if you just come down here to Greater Vancouver and you go to the Musqueam Reservation, Delbert Guerin, the old chief, is a friend of mine, a good friend. I've been to his house and so on. And Ernie Cray, who's the Stolo chief out in the Fraser Valley on the on the Fraser River, his sister Dawn Cray is one of the Willie Picton's victims that you may or may not know about. And Ernie wrote a book with Suzanne Fournier called Stolen from Our Embrace. And I wonder where that book is, because I have a copy of it around here someplace. But it's about the Indian children being taken. And then I have another one, a Kevin Annette book that you may or may not know about, talking about the Holocaust that we had here in BC. Because in 1922, for instance, I think the documents are very clear that 75% of the Indian children in residential school died that year, that particular year. 3 out of 4 died. And if you talk to Ernie Cray, or you talk to Delbert Guerin, or you talk to Joe Gosnell, or you talk to Harry Nice, strangely enough, they were all part of 6 children. Their families all had 6 children. And I've had Harry and Joe and Ernie with tears in their eyes when they talk about the Mounties coming and taking the kids. And the Mounties would come. Joe Gosnell is
That's not the way to do it.
They took the kids, and they didn't even put them in the same residential school. They put them in 6 different schools so that they didn't grow up with their sisters. And as Ernie Cray says in the book, Stolen from Our Embrace, no Indian family in the province of British Columbia for 100 years was allowed to raise their children. So how can you criticize a family that's not looking after the kids well today when they weren't raised by their parents, and they weren't raised by their parents, and they weren't raised by their parents?
That's right. No, that's right. You know, another huge problem we have is mental illness in the province.
Yes.
And it wasn't too long ago, maybe, 20 years ago or so, they closed Riverview. And all the doctors that I ever talked to said, what are they doing that for, you know? And so they closed it, and the idea was closer to home. If you, if your son is schizophrenic, be in the community. And it sounded good, except that they never funded it. And so now all these people, with bipolar disorder and the schizophrenics and the people that have, are challenged mentally, they're out there loose. And the drug culture just came in, so now you've got a cocaine addiction in a schizophrenic, and so what do you do with that? You've got, dual diagnosis, and that was unnecessary. Those people that were kept in places like Riverview at least got 3 meals a day, and they had a warm, dry bed to sleep in. And now it's not like that, and I think that people felt, well, you can't force people to do that. So, when Trudeau came along with rights and freedoms, which, in theory was a good idea, but the practicality was disastrous for so many. And so expensive too. If you're schizophrenic and addicted to cocaine, how do you support your?
Well, you can't.
So what
you can only do it by breaking into cars.
That's right. And you think, well, what do? You know, like it's so expensive that way. It'd be far better for the patient and better for the community to have these people looked after properly.
Well, the silly thing about what's happening right now, because we've been cleaning everything up, and to give the Campbell government a little bit of credit, they have bought, 8 or there's 12, I guess, hotels now, old hotels,
yes,
run-down
yes,
places,
yes,
and
yes.
they spent a small, the Portland Society and so on, they spent a small fortune, more money to renovate some of these things, to give an SRO room, a single room occupancy room, to a drug addict or somebody that gets lucky enough to get on the list. But I took a little run through downtown Vancouver, and I know the area very well, and I had no doubt in my mind that there were more people on the street today than there was at the same time last year. And of course, what's happened is, I know what's happened. I have no official statistics, but what's happened is, because we've provided all this nice housing and everything, another 500 or 600 or 1,000 people have shown up from Winnipeg, Regina, Saskatoon, Toronto, and Montreal, and so on, because there's more room on the streets down here again, and the handouts are better, and we're opening another 80 rooms up a
But
couple
the individual
of days.
person isn't being looked after properly.
They're not being looked after.
No.
We get into things like insight and so on. Gabor Mate, Dr. Mate, who's...
Well, I tried to illustrate in my book, with patient histories about these sort of problems, like what we talked about the natives. We've got stories of the natives and what happened to them, and why are we doing this? And then the same with the mental illness, stories of patients that are repeat offenders or whatever, and costing lots and lots of money, and it's just, unfathomable that we allow this.
The proof is absolutely, and I'm not unproud and I'm not ashamed or anything else to say that I knew Willie Picton quite well at one time. And the reason I knew him is because, as I said, I went to veterinary medicine in Guelph, Ontario, and my uncle, I worked for Health of Animals. My uncle was a veterinarian with people working for him in three provinces. And when I first came out here with H&R Block, I had an office at 2892 or 2692 Shaughnessy in Port Coquitlam, right at the corner of the Lougheed Highway and Shaughnessy, in that first shopping center as you come over the bridge and turn right. And Willie Picton and his brother David used to come into the coffee shop in that little strip mall and have coffee. And because they were pig farmers, I would talk to them, because I knew all about varicillus.
And they seemed like normal people at the time.
Well, they were. Well, they were, how old would they be? I'm talking 1969, so it's 40 years ago, and I'm quite sure none of the bad stuff had happened. And I used, and then I became a fairly big real estate person. I bought and sold 3,500 pieces of real estate, and I did all sorts of real estate lectures, and I used to use the Picton Pig Farm as an example of what happens in our society, because these guys were part of a family farm. David and Willie and the sister, never did meet the sister, and they had a pig farm, and they'd sold off some land, and they sold off some land, and in general, all around them, people were building townhouses and houses and so on, and then they would complain about the pig farm.
That's right.
So the boys had to quit raising pigs because of the stench that was affecting all the people in the area. And then the municipality came along. I mean, I'm talking over a 40-year period. And then so we started slaughtering pigs, which is where the thing of slaughtering the women came from. But then the municipality came along, and I can still remember when they rezoned it, said, well, this is not a farm anymore. So they made them industrial taxes. So instead of paying $1,000 a year farm taxes, they were wanting $120,000 a year, which then forces the owner to start selling off more land, which meant more people were complaining. And the Pictons, I'd almost like to write a book about it from the point of view that I saw over a 40-year period, because you can't forgive what Willie has supposedly done, but you also have to look at it again as it's society just taking this family apart. And where does everybody, we sort of look at people. Anyway, that's enough of that. Willie Picton, we can do that separate whatever.